Hello, friends. Welcome to the first ever Basket Under Review podcast, a new enterprise in affiliation with Basket Under Review, a website just launched today. It's Trilly Donovan and his Discord server. He's brought along a whole host of really talented, myself excluded, really talented writers, college basketball analysts, to start a new website, great content, storytelling, all the stuff that I think college basketball fans, at least I, really like to read about in the style that I like to read about it in. And so this is a podcast, sort of the flagship podcast there. I'll be hosting every week. We'll have guests, we'll have takes, we'll have digressions, and it should be a lot of fun talking about whatever's going on in college basketball, what's interesting to me anyway about college basketball in any given week. Before we begin, we've got a great guest for our first episode here. But before we begin, I do want to mention our sponsor. It's Home Field. I think if you're listening to this, you've probably heard of Home Field. It's quite simply the best place in the world to get college affiliated merchandise, shirts, sweatshirts, sweatpants, even plain sweatpants. People swear by those. No logos whatsoever. They're just really comfortable. So check out Home Field and support the show and support Home Field as well. And thank you to them for sponsoring.
The previous basket is under review.
Okay, so we've got our first guest in the virtual studio here. He is someone you've probably heard of if you cover college basketball. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say he is among the most, if not the most influential analysts, thinkers about college basketball of the past 20 years. His name is Ken Pomeroy of KenPom.com fame. Ken, how are you?
Doing good, Eamonn. Really excited to be on the inaugural podcast. Really excited about your venture, and hopefully I don't screw this up for you guys.
No, I think it should be good. I think if we're one and done, there will be larger issues that probably are they can't blame us for. But so I wanted to have you on. Just in general, to pick your brain about the off season and kind of what sticks out to you, but in particular, the conversation that dominated the sport last week, which was tournament expansion, and was, I have to say, in what is usually the deadest time of the year for college basketball, just the middle of July, absolute, there's a little bit of recruiting stuff that people go out and cover, but by and large, transfers are mostly settled, the draft is over, and it's a quiet time. All of a sudden got everybody all riled up last week. And there was a lot of discourse, and I found it to be quite entertaining at times. Just to get to the news that everybody knows anyway, on Friday, the NCAA announced it had not made, the men's basketball and women's basketball committees both announced they had not made any decision at all about expanding the tournament, whether from 68 to 72 or 76. They just kind of punted, said they hadn't come to a conclusion and that they were going to continue the discussion. So it was kind of a fittingly anticlimactic end to a kind of a silly week of people arguing with each other, I thought. But I'm wondering what you thought just about the news and about last week in general and kind of how the expansion conversation has evolved of late.
Yes. So
that's a lot there.
There's a lot there. The longer the news didn't break, it felt like pertinent to your podcast title, like a football review in the old days where like there would be a catch, and they would, review it and it'd be overturned to like an incompletion. And it was like obviously an incompletion, but it would take like minutes for them to figure out like, it seemed like it's not something obvious to review. And the reason it would take so long is because they were like, figuring out how much time to put back on the clock and where the ball should be spotted and all sorts of other stuff. And so eventually savvy people started to realize, the longer the review goes on, like more chances has to be overturned. And I kind of felt that way about the decision. It was like the longer it went on, I felt like, well, there's a lot of things you actually have to figure out if you want to expand here. And I was actually pretty skeptical that they were going to expand, but now I'm like, maybe they are. Maybe they are going to expand. So it wasn't surprising to me that they delayed it, I guess. I mean, I had no inside information. It was just kind of interesting to me that there are a lot of things you have to consider. And in all this dialogue that I've heard, people are so against this, myself excluded, but people are so against this that we've never considered like the other issues that have to be kind of resolved here before expansion occurs.
Yeah, one of them being money, which I think is something that people haven't talked about a lot. And I think just the understandable suspicion of most fans is, oh, they're doing this for money. Because that's been the arc of history in college sports for however long, forever, really. And particularly over the last 5 years with realignment, I think you have a lot of fans kind of primed to be cynical about a college sports world that now has Stanford in the Atlantic Coast Conference, right? So I think fans misunderstanding a little bit of the issue comes down to the money aspect and the assumption that the NCAA is just doing a money grab and that its member schools are just solely focused on the financial side. When in fact, one of the things they have to figure out is the TV rights deal goes till 2030. Warner Brothers / CBS is under no obligation to pay them any more money until 2032. And so the NCAA has actually been trying to figure out, okay, if we host these extra games, like how do we pay for that? If there's no extra money in the budget, like we have to move some things around here. In addition to all the logistics, as you kind of alluded to, of actually hosting these games, where are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? This sort of stuff, the folks at the NCAA, I think, do a really nice job hosting the tournament just as an event. And it takes a lot of advanced work of getting sites ready and all of the logistics that go into it. So, I think that's an under-discussed aspect, is just, and maybe an argument to me in some ways against it, is fundamentally my view has come down to, I haven't heard a fantastic argument for expansion that I've been like super duper convinced by. I've had my thinking on it changed a little bit reading you in the past and hearing you talk about it. John Gassaway has written about it, and I think a fairly convincing and good faith style. I think that was maybe, we need John getting back a little bit more active on the blog, because I think his voice was missing last week, and some of the people arguing for it didn't quite have the same level of erudition and ability to.
As far as I know, there was only one person arguing for it publicly last week.
Yes, it was our friend Seth Davis, who did his absolute best to play devil's advocate all week, and I honestly kind of salute him, because he was in the firing line. But I think the money argument, you could almost in a cynical way say, okay, well, look, Amazon said they're going to give them $1 gajillion for an 80-team tournament. You're the NCAA, you kind of can't turn it down, and everybody kind of say, hey, this is the way the world works or whatever. I think the difficult thing, if you're against expansion and you do know that there's no extra money involved here, is, okay, well, so why do you want to do it? And then that comes back to the participation side of things, which some people find convincing, certain administrators definitely find convincing, and I can kind of get my arms around that argument a little bit better. But I'm curious what you think of, do you take the financial stuff out of it, you set the logistics aside, just the core, I don't want to say moral, but sort of ethical underlying reason why you would want a bigger tournament if you're the NCAA or a fan or you.
Right. I mean, to me, the number one argument is that for lack of a better term, the mid-major at-large bid is kind of dead now. Yeah. And to me, that's a very sad development. Last year, so like the deal is this, like, with the tournaments, when we went to 64 in the 80s, it was fundamentally a different sport back then, like a different structure. You look back at the number of leagues that got multiple bids back then, it was regularly 12, 13 leagues for the first 10, 15 years of the tournament. In 1995, 15 teams got multiple bids, which is like hard to do in a 64-team tournament. And then over time, that number has dwindled as, power conference membership has ballooned. And obviously last year it was a total disaster. And there were seven leagues that got multiple bids, which was 2 fewer than had ever occurred before. And it might be a little bit of an outlier going forward, but probably not much of one. And, I look at like UC San Diego. I mean, they won 30 bids out of the 12, or they won 30 games out of the 12th best league in the country, and would not have gotten that large bid had they lost in their conference tournament, according to the seed list. VCU, were co-champs of the 8th best league in the country, and may not have gotten an at-large bid if they had lost their conference championship.
I think the committee said they wouldn't. Right?
Yeah,
I think that was. Yeah, I think they had said so.
And you go back to 2011 when VCU made it. They were the 4th best team. Or not the 4th best team, but they finished 4th in the 13th best league in the country then, and got an at-large bid. Those days are over. Like, those days aren't coming back. But I would like to give those teams a shot at getting an at-large bid if they don't win their conference tournament. And I personally am fine doing that while accepting, lower level teams from the Big 12 or whatever. Like I was not offended watching the Xavier Texas game last year. Like, it was a really good basketball game, and I get that some people aren't interested in that, and that's fine. But the first round was pretty dull. Even like the Xavier Texas game was better than any game probably in the first round, and I'm okay with having like a bunch of those competitive games on Tuesday and Wednesday. And if it means getting a UC San Diego or a VCU or an Indiana State last year, maybe a better example because they actually didn't make it, getting those teams in the tournament, I think to me it's worth it.
Yeah, I think that's the most convincing. And I had a comment on my piece that I wrote about it on my newsletter at EamonnBrennan.com. That a little plug there. That essentially said the same thing, that they would like fundamentally take the trade of, okay, you're gonna give us 5 or 6 more 15 and 17 or 17 and 15 or whatever you want to call it, SEC teams, Big 12 teams, Big 10 teams. A straggler from the ACC that's like 24-8 but didn't beat anybody all year because the league was bad, stuff like that. As long as you give me Indiana State, as long as you give me UC Irvine, and I can see that. My concern with that is we say that in theory, but then will we not potentially be back here in 5 years when the creep of larger, more consolidated, ever richer conferences kind of creates this effect just further down the seed line?
Yeah, I mean, to me that's a separate issue. Like, yeah,
the NCAA can't solve for that. To be fair, like they just try to pick the best teams, right? But I do worry that the one argument that I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm cool with that. Then I come back to it and it's like, oh, will we kind of be here, and then we'll be like, we need 80, we need 96.
I hear you. I have no objection to 80 personally myself either. 96 seems like a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that argument is like the slippery slope argument is just not compelling to me. I don't know how to argue against it. Like, right. I'm not saying that couldn't happen. But for now, like, to me, like the idea of there's a slippery slope down the line, and that's a reason for not including UC San Diego in a situation where they don't win their conference tournament. Is not a good enough reason to me. Like, that's the thing, is that, yourself excluded, by like a lot of the reason I really didn't comment last week is everybody who's chiming in on this. First of all, a lot of people don't even cover the sport year round that were chiming in on it, but even the people that do, have the intensity of like 100 red hot suns about this, about not having it. Like we're ruining some sort of institution here, and so it's really hard to like have a conversation about it. But it's like so many of the points that people bring up, I feel like are not compelling and trying to fit a previously held opinion. Like, the best example possibly is like, it makes the regular season meaningless, which to me, it makes the regular season more meaningful. You're going to have 8 to 12 more teams battling for an at-large bid. And in addition, you're going to have fewer direct bids to the field of 64. So now you got to be a 9 seed really to be safe to get to the field of 64. Some 10 seeds I guess would get in, depending on how they select the teams, how many games end up being at larges and how many games end up being conference champs in the first 2 days. But there's going to be more teams involved and more at stake in the last 3 to 4 weeks of the season. And to me, that's a good thing. Again, even if it means that we care about a 5-13 LSU team or something getting into the tournament. Like I still think that it will increase interest among some of these borderline teams, and it will not make the regular season any more meaningless than going from 32 and having at-large teams in the 70s to going to 64 made the regular season meaningless.
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing that I guess I haven't really thought about. I've been, obviously I do Bubble Watch every year, and it's a big reason people read the newsletter. And I think my sort of gut feeling has typically been, oh God, like I have to do Bubble Watch about like, let's just look at your rankings from last year and just pick out a team. I have them pulled up. Like I have to worry about Wake Forest, or whatever, North Texas, Arizona State, or whatever down here in the 70s and 80s. But that's a fair point. Like those teams have skin in the game longer in the season than they do otherwise. Where if you're a fan of Arizona State, you're going into, I guess it's the Big 12 tournament now. I almost said the Pac-12. Like there's always the I went to Indiana in the Mike Davis era, and just after they went to the Final Four, right? I got there in 2003, and so most of those years they were pretty bad or mediocre. And they were you go into I remember as at the time as a fan, a student in college, like watching the first Thursday of the Big Ten tournament, being like, man, maybe they can make a run here. And it's just like, no, they're not. They're not good. This is not going to happen. Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule. You had NC State last year and all that good stuff. But that is a kind of a depressing place to be in. And if you're a little bit further down the seed line and there's a more at-large bids available to you, I can kind of see that idea of some of the teams that we kind of dismiss as like, oh God, this team doesn't belong in the tournament. Well, there's a few more spots now, so everybody's got a little bit more of a live chance later in the year.
Yeah. I mean so that would be one point. Obviously, I get the perspective from being, someone who does bubble watch, that it's going to be a pain in the butt to follow these teams, and you probably feel like Wake Forest, man, they don't deserve to be in the postseason, and I get that.
And you just get writing about them every week or sometimes twice a week. Later in the year, you're just like, get this team out of my face. Yeah. I cannot watch them again. Like some of these Pac-12 teams over the years, like Oregon or whatever, when they're like average and they're playing at like 11 p.m. and I'm waiting for them to finish up a game, and the Matthew Knight Arena's got like 4,000 people in it. You're just like, get these guys out of here. I cannot watch them play anymore. So that part of it is I'm like viscerally kind of like bracing myself for that. But I do see your point on the inverse of it.
Yeah, and I'll also say, like, secretly, I'm hoping that the selection committee shares we do expand here. The selection committee kind of shares your feelings about this, about the chaos of tracking all of these teams, and that continues to push us closer to a more objective method to selecting the teams. Because ultimately, that is the holy grail. Like, you have this, you add 4 to 8 more teams, you give UC San Diego the access, and then you have this objective means of selecting teams where what's at stake every game down the stretch. What's at stake for them to get into, straight bye to Thursday or Friday, or what it takes for them to get into the tournament. And to me, that would be incredible drama, like more drama than we have right now. And obviously, the objective part of it doesn't require us to expand, but I think I could see the adding more teams and the ridiculousness of trying to separate team 76 from 77. Hitting the NCAA committee hopefully pretty hard, and people, maybe the public, kind of realizing, hey, actually, or coaches especially, because they're really the ones who kind of pushed getting rid of the RPI, and I think they're the ones who could push a more objective approach to selecting teams. Hopefully it would get them to realize how ridiculous this process is, and that an objective approach would just increase the drama and really like make the stakes more known as we get down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, so that brings me to a great question I wanted to ask you, because I've seen you advocate for that in the past. The objective approach, essentially like a metrics based approach to tournament selection to some degree. But I want you to flesh that out a little bit. What does that look like to you? What combination of models or stats is it? WAB? Like what do you see as that number or set of numbers looking like?
Yeah, are we going with WAB or WAB? Like,
I don't even know.
I'm a WAB guy. I know Bubba Cunningham's a WAB guy, but
okay, there you go.
Well,
yeah, Bubba's doing it.
Wins above bubble, exactly. Wins above bubble is probably a fine place to start. I mean, I think obviously it would be a transformative change to go to this, so you'd want to like do a little research into some of the limitations of it, and obviously ESPN has their own like strength of record approach, and that has some interesting differences from WAB or WAB, but as a starting point, either approach would be amazing. WAB is a little more, it is more transparent in the sense you kind of know the value of each game, so you could pretty easily predict, hey, if this team wins, they're going to jump 3 spots or something, which is not something we have, obviously in the net or even in just guessing the seed list with the NCAA, because we don't know that. So that would be a fantastic start. There are things we do need to research, like, the thing I think that, people on the analytics side have always like spoken about is that, teams don't get enough credit for beating, teams ranked 100 to 150 or something on the road, right? Like, right. Those aren't quad 1 wins, but they're really difficult. If you play 30 of those games, a bubble team's going to lose 7 or 8 of them on average, and they look like bad losses or whatever, but they're not. And so whether WAB is properly calibrated for that, I think is a worthy area of research before something like this would get implemented. But it's honestly probably really close as is. And to me, it'd be a great starting point.
Sure. Well, I think if fans are mad and up in a lather about realignment, I look forward to ACC fans and their response to a metrics-driven approach to tournament selection, because that has been, I think, their number one gripe in the past. Although last year, I think they all just gave up because everyone was just like, we get it. The league's bad. Duke's good, but everyone else is bad. It's fine. But in the years prior to that, you would write like, yeah, the ACC is just not very good, and I don't think Pitt's going to get in the tournament. And they're like, oh, you got to watch them play. They got 15 wins in the league, and you haven't watched them play at all. Like, look at Bub Carrington, he's awesome. And it has been a difficult divide, I think, sometimes. And this is even among sometimes, not too many, but occasionally a commenter, even on like my newsletter, which is a pretty self-selected group of readers, right? It's not like I'm writing for ESPN anymore where the comment section would just be a mess. It's a self-chosen group of people who are paying who can comment. And even then there would be some frustration of just like, I don't think the ACC is getting enough credit in the numbers. And I don't know how to bridge that with folks when the stakes are not just, oh yeah, this little piece of information is going to feed into what the committee sees on the team sheet, and that's going to maybe that kind of have an effect on whether or not they get selected, as opposed to just that's the number and it's going to be the number, and then you either get into the tournament or you don't.
Right.
Some education might be needed, is what I'm saying, Ken, and you might have to take up a years-long educational campaign insofar as you're not doing that already.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, I back in the old days when I was on the old Bird app, I'd experienced that firsthand. Even like recently, they just had the Big 12, I think, football media days, and Brett Yormark, the commissioner, basically said like the Big 12 is the best basketball conference or something. And the comments on Twitter were amusing because for most people it seems like what determines the best conference in college basketball is whatever conference the team that wins the championship is from.
Yeah.
So they were like, UConn's won 6 championships. How many of the Big 12 won recently? It's like, that's not really how it works. But there's a certain group of people that are, I think, beyond what I'm willing to educate. But
right.
I think there's still a group we can influence and hopefully make smarter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example of how I think, generally speaking, even though there are people who still think that way, that your work, your site has changed. Like, I remember growing up, and even sort of early in my career, there would be a lot of arguments about conference strength that were just like, well, look at the best 5 teams in each league. You know what I mean? You wouldn't want to play any of these 5 teams in the tournament, whereas this other league has 2 or 3 good teams, and whatever, the rest is kind of average. And I think your site, particularly your conference strength rankings, have helped people understand like the whole conference matters. And if you have teams in the bottom of the league that are ranked, 230th and 210th and 200th in Ken Pom or net or whatever else, and you're beating up on them, that has an overall sort of, knock-on effect for the rest of the league. And so I do think that's one way that your stuff has sort of gradually influenced thinking in this regard, even if there are going to be people on Twitter, forever saying, well, the ACC's won the national title a few years ago, so it should get 7 bids this year or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there is some nuance in determining, the best conference. The way I do it is it's basically like the median team in the league, but you could have some other measure that's, hey, what's the top 25th percentile in the league or something.
Sure.
But the whole thing is like, strength of league is one of those things I feel like that should be answered by an algorithm. A human can come up with a criteria, whatever you want to do, show me the criteria you want, and then we'll make an algorithm and figure it out. Otherwise it's just, like you said, purely subjective. People change the goalposts all the time. And, that's how ACC fans work. Hey, I grew up in ACC country and I'm partial to the ACC and try not to disrespect it. But, it's obviously much different now than it was in the 90s when it really, truly was the best conference in the country year in, year out.
Right. And had a much tighter cultural sort of makeup too. I think part of the ACC conversation in the past few years that's been challenging for classic ACC people to get their head around is that it's not the same league anymore. Just because it says ACC and you've still got Duke and Carolina at the top of the league most years, it's not what it once was in terms of its very tight sort of geographic and cultural. Like, these are basketball schools from basketball states, and the states in the South that really care about this sport relative to football. You know, your North Carolinas and even South Carolina to a certain extent, Virginia certainly. So you've sort of seen that go away, and at the same time, you have eggheads like me writing in Bubble Watch about how the league is garbage now or whatever. And I can imagine if you're like a 6-year-old ACC fan, you're like, I hate this. This is BS. Like, I'm not standing for this. So I do empathize with them because it's challenging, but it's just the league hasn't been what it was for many years. And I think that change is not just, some teams have had a few down years or whatever. It's just the league is fundamentally different and doesn't make the same sort of sense that it used to.
Yeah, I think that's why people probably backed off of you last year too. It's like the hardcore ACC fans are like, these Western teams in the league I don't even recognize the league anymore. Yeah. So even though like SMU probably actually helped the league.
SMU raised the level a little bit last year. Yeah, they did.
Stanford wasn't bad, you know.
No, Stanford's going to be good. I think Stanford's going to be good with Kyle White anyway. Like, they're going to be a solid program for a while. That guy's been good basically everywhere he's been. Okay, so that's expansion. I mean, look, I think I'm fine with 68, and I kind of wrote that. It's just that I hadn't heard my number one thing last week throughout all of the furore about it was I just hadn't heard anyone make a really convincing argument that wasn't just, you'll watch it anyway. Like, who are you kidding? You're going to watch the tournament anyway. Don't act like you're not going to watch it. And my response to that is like, well, of course I am. Like, I love the NCAA tournament. I watch if there were 128 teams in it. But it doesn't mean I think it will be superior or not necessarily inferior if it changes. I think there's a back and forth there that you can have about the structure of the sport and how you want to reward teams at different levels and all that good stuff. But I didn't hear that argument very much, which is why I'm glad to have you on the podcast today, because you're actually someone who can make that argument and wants to make it, as opposed to just say, hey, come on, like, all right, it's not ideal, but whatever, you'll get over it.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. And, I'd also say, like, Seth Davis for whatever you think of his argument. Like, I did appreciate the fact that he had, commissioner of the A-10 and the commissioner of the Missouri Valley.
Oh, yeah.
Basically come out in support of it. And like, that's not, I don't know how high that is on my list of considerations to do this, but it is a consideration. Like, they're, presumably representing their members, and they generally feel like it would be good for them as well to expand. So,
right. No, it's not nothing. I mean, there are plenty of mid-major commissioners who are in favor of it. I don't think those commissioners are looking at it within the NCAA and those conversations that administrators have. And I do think people need to understand about the NCAA. From all of my interactions with people at the NCAA, with conference commissioners of various sizes, for the most part, I think, with a couple of exceptions, maybe at the higher end of the sport, these people operate in good faith. Like, they are genuinely thinking about what's best for their membership, and they also care about sort of the overall health of the sport. They're not money grabbing. And we talked about this at the top of the show. They're not, like, in this context anyway. In other instances,
money's a factor.
Yes, of course it is. But this isn't a, like, hey, look, we got all this money on the table, we got to take it. Like, let's go. Maybe it makes more money down the line with more TV inventory, obviously, but that's going to be a little ways off. I mean, it's still 7 years off unless they renegotiate that contract. So, I do think that there's a tendency among fans to think there's just like this insidious, greedy aspect to these conversations. And I kind of feel like it's hard. I think part of what Seth was trying to do that I do appreciate is kind of shine a light on, like, no, these people actually think this will just be a net positive, and it'll be a positive for mid-major leagues and for high major leagues and everyone, not everyone, because they didn't come to a decision, but the conversation is not how can we bilk these people for more money. It's how can we, expand participation and make the tournament better and maybe get a couple more days of games and maybe get some more mid-majors in the tournament. And I think people need to like understand that I promise you these it's not some like nefarious conspiracy or anything like that. They're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So much of the pushback is generally based in conspiracy. Like,
yeah,
when I say we want to get more, get one or two more mid majors in, people are like, well, they're not going to take mid majors, and it's like, I mean, I believe over half the committee is not part of like, a power conference affiliation. So like, do you really think they're like, the commissioner of the A10 or whatever, the commissioner of some of these lesser leagues or ADs from lower level teams are in on this conspiracy to like screw over mid major teams in the selection process? Like,
right.
I'm not buying it personally.
Right. No, and I think I heard someone respond to Seth the other day with just like, well, yeah, of course the mid-major commissioners are going to say that because they all want to work for the SEC one day, and you're just like, well, no, I don't actually think that's
playing the long game.
Yeah, playing the long game and getting on.
When the SEC has an opening, they're going to be like, when the SEC has an opening, they're going to be like, hey, what did you do in your past to help us out?
I'm going to need to see all your old tweets.
Yeah.
What did you send Seth during the great realignment debate of mid-July 2025? Yeah, so that's where we are with expansion. I think it's going to be really interesting to follow because, like you said, there's a lot of logistical stuff that has to get ironed out. It's not just a matter of you press a button and go to 72 or 76 teams. Like you do have to figure all this stuff out, and you have to figure out the hosting games and financial side of that I think probably had a reasonable role in why a decision didn't get made last week. Is just we kind of keep trying to figure out how all this is going to work.
Yeah, that's the biggest argument against it to me is the logistics. Like the money aside, I don't really quite understand how the units work and all that.
Yeah,
so they can figure that out. But just getting teams, like ideally there would be no tournament. There would be no conference tournament games on Sunday, and you'd have like the selection show early or something. I know that's not going to happen. And so getting teams, Sunday night to their sites Tuesday. I mean, the NCAA has had some problems with that in the past, just with, getting 4 teams there. Now, if they have to get, 8 or 10 teams there, like, I can imagine that would be a challenge. And so that's the one, like, that's to me is the biggest criticism, or the biggest drawback that I would appeal to is that, it's going to be pretty challenging to kind of pull this off and have teams turn around in 48 hours and play their games.
Yeah, and I do think that's a thing that whatever you do with the structure of the tournament, I fundamentally do not think you can change the selection show Sunday cadence to game start at whatever 11:50 on Thursday,
right?
And call those the real games. Make that when your bracket is due. Speaking of Seth, he was talking to people in his Twitter mentions about like, what, you can't get your bracket done by Tuesday morning? And I was sitting there being like, no, I can't. I actually can't. I never do. My bracket's filled out like early Thursday morning, late Wednesday. I, get all weird about it and agonize over it for a few days. And so you have to keep that sort of time-honored cadence, I think, and then squeezing the rest of that stuff in there is where the challenge comes in.
Agree. That's the most compelling thing is that, like, look, if you hate having these games Tuesday and Wednesday, I mean, my thing is like, you don't have to watch them. Like, that's kind of how I was the first 3 years of the first 4. I was like, this is stupid. I don't like these extra games. I'm going to boycott them.
Right.
And I got over it. And actually, like, a lot of the games are pretty compelling. Even the UNC San Diego State game is compelling for, comical reasons, just like Colorado State, Virginia was 2 years ago. It's like,
right. Yeah, poor Virginia.
They're blowouts. They're still kind of, interesting the way they turn out. But regardless of how, we might disagree on how much we want to watch those games. And it's not must-see TV for me, but by Thursday at noon, like, it's the same tournament by that point to me. So it's, I agree. Like that, you can't mess with that structure. That is what is great about the tournament. And, I mean, by all accounts, that's always, at least in this iteration, always going to be there.
Right. Okay, well, that's where the tournament expansion conversation is. I'm probably still softly anti, which I think makes me an outlier relative to the regular, just from what I'm seeing from fans and media members who the default or maybe median position seems to be extremely strongly anti to the point of, sincere anger. I think I have some reservations about, writing bubble watch with 76 teams in the field. That might be a little bit annoying. But other than that, that's a selfish reason. So maybe the tournament would be awesome with 76 teams, and I'll just have to get over it. Or like pay a GPT to write bubble watch and just pretend nobody notices. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, all right, let's transition. I did want to ask you a little bit about sort of just your work in general and the maybe slightly, I don't know, I don't mean to prejudice the question, slightly changing or maybe not nature of your preseason ratings at peak transfer. You know, we're basically at peak transfer now, and we're also at peak Euro infusion of talent into college basketball, because as I think most listeners will already know, but just in case you don't, there has been an influx of European players into college basketball in the past couple of years because of NIL, because a lot of these guys have a chance to make some pretty good money in the States for a year or two, or maybe longer, better than they would get playing for their club teams in Europe, but they may not be NBA caliber guys, so they can come here for a few years, try to get to the NBA. If they don't, go back to Europe, play for a European club. So how do you factor in not just transfers, but international players into your preseason ratings? How much does the personnel stuff, has it changed? Is it different for you now? Kind of where are you at with all of it?
Yeah, I mean, the preseason ratings have definitely evolved from when I first did them in 2011. You know, it was basically just how many minutes. Well, it was like quality of minutes. There was a quality of minutes measure, and I didn't even consider transfers.
Right.
Like, it was so simple back then, and the ratings are pretty good.
Yeah.
But obviously that method would not hold now, and so so it's definitely much more complex in terms of including transfers. It's fairly simple with players with previous D1 experience. You know, just you can use various box score stats and strength of schedule and whatnot, and know which teams they were transferring to and adjust accordingly. The problem lies with like Euros and like other college age people who have not played Division I. So it's obviously an increasing, especially for, the level below power conference leagues, an increasing dip into the D2, D3 pool. And those are harder. The Euro guys are probably not as bad because usually there's some sense of like a ranking for them. Like usually 24/7 does include most of those guys eventually in a freshman ranking. And the ones they whiff on, I'll just make something up. I mean, usually I have a pretty educated guess on some of those guys. The non-D1 guys are more the trouble. Like, it completely had no knowledge of the guys at Drake last year. And that's something that I probably should do some work on. I have not done any work on it this off season, but there's still time. But overall, like having more players with more of a Division I background or more of a statistical background, we'll include the Euro guys, it hasn't hurt the ratings at all. I mean, and if anything, it helps it. And like last year's ratings were probably as good as they've ever been, relative to the fact that nowadays there really is more change from year to year. It used to be you could just kind of rely on how good teams were, the past 2 or 3 years, and that would produce a great rating. And it still produces a really good rating, but there's just so much more change now that you can't totally rely on that. And yet last year, whatever I do to my ratings this year, they will not be as good as they were last year, because I'm sure a fair amount of it was just good fortune. But I think I was the only person that had, Houston, Duke, and Auburn in the top 3 to start the season.
Oh, wow.
Computer or human, and obviously that turned out really well. So,
Right.
That's kind of the lowdown on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned Drake. Was Drake low in your rankings to start the season because of the
They weren't super low. I think they were
guys?
they were like 120 or something.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like embarrassingly low, but the cool kids 133. So the cool kids who knew their roster and knew that Bennett Sturts was going to wreck the Valley. I think we're on the fact that Drake was pretty underrated at the start of the season.
I mean, kudos to them. I think Bennett Sturts is an awesome player, but taking a guy from D2, no matter how good he is, and expecting him to be really good in Division I, or at least as good as Sturts was, is a call. You credit where it's due.
For sure. And yeah, just having the continuity of all those guys having played together, previously,
Yeah.
like, an all transfer team, but it was like a lot of those guys had played together before with the same coach. So in a sense, they were not really a transfer team and had that advantage of continuity that few teams have these days.
Yeah. So your preseason ratings, if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that sort of continuity between rosters and also just programs used to be pretty heavily weighed, right? Like it was just, okay, well, I don't know about this Virginia roster, but Virginia's good pretty much every year, so they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. We've got them ranked 12th or whatever. Has that been tweaked a little bit as you've gotten into this era?
Yeah, as I've used more like individual player knowledge, the impact of program strength in previous years has decreased. It's still pretty strong. Like it's still coaching is still useful, and certain coaches are going to get more out of new players than others. So there still is that variable that is important, but it obviously, things have changed in that regard, and just given the fact that there's more team movement than there used to be, there's more influence from the player side of things. But also, I should point out, like, it's a good time to mention that I continue to see that, like, keeping the same, all things being equal, you take a player of equal skill, a player that stays in your program under the same coach is going to have more chance for better production than a player coming in from out of the program. So continuity is still valued if it's good continuity.
Right.
But obviously, no longer do we shame transfers for transferring and think they're going to, stink. Like, obviously you can build a really good team just on transfers alone.
Right. I think that's one thing we've seen coaches try to do a little bit more consciously in the last year or two is, we're going to blow our roster up, but a lot of the guys we're going to offer are going to be sophomores. And so we have a chance to have, maybe some of these guys will leave the following year, but we have a chance at some level of continuity if we can keep a couple of these guys that are going to be starters or, highly used reserves in the program for a year or two or three. Whereas I do feel like there was a brief moment there where you had like Muss and to an extreme degree, but there are also other coaches who have done it. Yeah, who are just like, I'll take whoever. And if they can play, they can play. I don't care if they're a fifth-year senior. We'll get a bunch of fifth-year seniors. That Texas team, the year Beard got let go in the middle of the season was kind of like that. They were all really old, had played everywhere else. I do think we're seeing more sort of intentional roster construction with coaches being like, we'll take a bunch of transfers, but we want them to be sophomores or maybe juniors if we can manage it.
Yeah, no question. Like, you're trying to thread that needle between getting guys who are further along in their development process, yet can stick around for another year or two.
So on your ratings, what is the biggest change or challenge of the past, 5 years? The thing that when you've sort of been conceptualizing or thinking about tweaks that has maybe changed the most from, 10 years ago when things were maybe a little bit simpler, or, we kind of mentioned it with the continuity stuff, but like, what are you thinking about on an off-season basis now when you're looking at tweaking stuff?
So what are we talking about here? Tweaking the preseason ratings or the actual ratings?
You tell me. What's
February ratings?
The February ratings? There you go.
I don't know. I mean, I think like I said, the preseason ratings did really well last year. Like,
Right.
I'm constantly thinking about development, even, but last year went really well for me. So it's like you get kind of motivated.
So just put your feet up and don't worry.
And it's like this year's going to go a lot worse, but I'm, it's hard to get motivated because like the preseason ratings did really well, and the ratings did really well. Like the top 8 teams entering the tournament made the Elite 8. Like,
all right,
that'll never happen again. But it happened, and so it's like, should I really tweak things? I think to me the thing that needs to be solved, that's super duper annoying to me is obviously people figured out 5 to 10 years ago that running up the score is good in any of these systems.
Right.
Even the ones that say that they minimize running up the score, still running up the score is good. And I feel like one of my legacies in life will be there's a butterfly effect for me, like working on these ratings in the computer lab at the University of Wyoming in 1999 to Juwan Howard punching, swipe at right? Like there's a line there, and you see this more and more lately. Like I saw a game last year. I forget who it was. I swear it was like a Big West game or something. And a kid, like, it was a walk-on, and the team was up, 10 or something at the end of the game. It's a walk-on the court, and he takes a three with 5 seconds left or something and makes it. And, he's a walk-on. Like, that's what walk-ons do. And the opposing coach was, like, in the handshake line, like, got into it. That's like, I don't know, there's something wrong here. And I do feel like the fact that, especially in the net, even more so than my ratings, scoring margin, all those points do matter. And so I would love to solve that. And I've, worked on that over the years. And you always get back to the fact that from a predictive standpoint, scoring margin is really important.
Right.
But I think there are certainly better ways than the way I handle it to limit that effect. And I would love to get to the point where those kind of things don't matter at all. So at least in my ratings, we can put this to bed. But that's, probably the number one thing that would keep me up at night.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that also annoys fans, particularly from a net perspective, where they're like getting down to the core of the season and paying very close attention to their teams. I mean, even in November, again, speaking to Indiana, I've got friends who are Indiana fans, and they were watching the team's net ranking the past couple, Novembers, just being like, well, we only beat so-and-so by 6 at home, and so our net is terrible now, but it was still a win, so why should that matter? And it goes back and forth. But I do think the wild swings in the net that fans sometimes see from day to day because their team beat the 250th ranked team by 55 or whatever, or beat them by 5 and their net went down 10 points or something, I think it tends to drive people a little bit batty by the end of the season.
Yeah, it's kind of the point where allegedly, I'll say allegedly here because I'm not in the know enough to know this is a total fact, but allegedly there's like a premium for like Mississippi Valley State in terms of buy games because you can beat them by, the top teams can beat them by 60 or 70 points. And like if you look in the net at the teams that play Mississippi Valley State non-conference, they tend to be on average, like 4 or 5 spots higher than they are in my system, which kind of limits the scoring margin effect a little bit in those games. So, like that's something I feel like the good folks of the NCAA just don't seem to care about. And I wish they cared about it a little bit more because that is like, it's a problem. It's a problem that like people don't want to play walk-ons at the end of the game because they think it's going to cost them a tournament bid. Like that's not great for the sport.
Right. Yeah. And you being hyper obsessed about the difference between a 15 and an 18-point loss is not really where you want anyone in the sport to be. Like there is a balance between being metrics inclined and understanding how this stuff affects your net and vice versa and whatever, but you don't want to go too far with it. But
so that's another point in favor of WAB.
There you go. Yeah.
Is that that kind of stuff really doesn't matter. WAB just cares about wins, and that's ultimately how it should be.
So I have one last question before I let you go and we wrap here. You are losing an SEO battle. Are you aware of this? There's an indie artist, a woman named Ken Pomeroy, apparently quite popular. She's touring. There's a show in DC close to where I live, which I might actually go to later this year, just to say I went, and I can send you like a voice recording or something. But she's a Native American indie artist. She's 22 years old. I have no idea do you know if her real name is actually Ken? This is really what I want to ask you. Are you aware if her real name is Ken Pomeroy, or did she find you and think that's an obscure college basketball reference? I'm going to use that.
Yeah, somebody asked me about that the other day. They were like, she just like picked that name because of your name, right? I'm like, no, that's actually her name.
It's her real name. Okay.
Her name is, I think, like McKenna.
Okay.
But yeah, she chose to go by Ken. I mean, not to compare myself to Michael Jordan, but I will do that right now. Like, I feel like it really is like a Michael B. Jordan type of thing. Like, let's throw the middle initial so we disambiguify this, but yeah, she's coming to Salt Lake City in a few weeks too. So I was thinking about getting that sign that I don't know if you familiar with this, when the Providence fans were all up in arms over me a few years ago. There was a kid at the Providence game who had a sign that said Ken Pom is a fraud.
There you go.
Someone put my name on a sign. I'm going to try to get that sign from him and go to the club where she's playing and just hold that up in the background.
I mean, you could stand outside the concert and hand out stickers and just have with the website on it, and maybe convert some subscribers.
Right.
It's just a thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just literally Googled you the other day, and that was the first result that came up was Ken Pomeroy, the musician.
Really? Oh, that's a problem.
I know. Well,
so
maybe it was maybe. Hold on, let me do it right now.
You're probably into like the country folk scene though, a little more than most, and that's.
I am. That might be a weighted algorithmic type of deal, but yeah, I'm seeing Ken Pomeroy official website, KenPomeroymusic.com. Above.
It's so funny because like 4 years ago, her dad contacted me, and he was like, oh, hey, when you do a search for Ken Pomeroy music, like your picture comes up. Can you change that? And I was like, I have no control over that, pal.
I'll get in touch with someone at Google.
Sounds like you got the last laugh on that one. There's number one now.
Google search result. The people who put inputs into Google search results famously accessible and easy to contact. Okay, well, so there's no hard feelings. You're good. It's all fine.
All the Ken Poms, I think, are, there's plenty of room at the Ken Pom table. We'll take it.
Yeah,
I see so many people I think she had like a profile in Rolling Stone or something last few months, and people are dropping my name in the social media platforms. Like, what's this guy doing? He's like cranking out ratings, and he's like singing.
It would be pretty incredible if you were moonlighting as you were using like AI filters to lighten up your voice to a soprano or whatever, and putting out a secondary music career. That'd be quite impressive. But okay, well, we're to the bottom of that. I think that's all we have. This is again our first ever episode of Basket Under Review podcast. The podcast for the new Basket Under Review site. It's a subscription site. You can go there, you sign up, you get access to Trilly Donovan's Discord, where he breaks a ton of transfer news all season, a ton of coaching news, really kind of foremost among newsbreakers in college basketball these days, and now expanding into content analysis, all types of fun stuff from really good writers and talented folks. So go check it out. Also check out our sponsor, Home Field. Thank you to them for sponsoring the show. Ken, thank you for being our first guest, a big guest, a big get.
Wow.
And it was a good conversation. I feel like we came to a middle ground on expansion in a polite way, which was not really the case for most people that I saw arguing about it on the internet last week. So I feel like we're a step ahead here.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed the opportunity to chat with you about it. You've always been one of the reasonable ones on this topic, and appreciated, of course, reading your work over the year, and really excited about this new venture. So congrats on that, and yeah, thanks for having me on. Should be fun. We'll see how it goes. Thank you again, Ken. Thank you to whoever's producing this podcast. I don't even know yet. We'll iron out some of these wrinkles, and we'll talk to you very soon next week. Come check out the website. Bye, everybody.